Hi everyone, welcome to this live Q&A session. I think we're live now. If you can see me clearly, if you can hear me clearly, if there are no problems whatsoever, I'm also keeping an eye on the chat on my phone, so just let me know and we will kick this off. Hi, good evening. I see a couple of comments coming in. Fantastic. Alright, quick disclaimer. I have a bit of a cold, so hopefully my voice is clear enough and I don't sound too like I'm sniffing all the time. Let's just get started. Let's do a quick couple of questions that I wanted to kind of get out there, and then I will start answering whatever questions you have for me on the chat. Hi. One of the first questions that people ask me, a quick brief about me, if you do not know. I have been with Wizako since 2008, handling classes for the GMAT, the GRE, and the CAT. I think of myself as a serial test taker because I've written all of these exams that I take classes for. The last time I wrote the GMAT, I scored a 780 in it, and I also decided to kind of take a break for myself and get an MBA. So I went to USC Marshall, and I belong to the class of 2021, so I graduated in last May, 9 months ago, and I'm back here teaching for the GMAT again. Right? So one of the first questions that a lot of people ask me is, how did you score 780, and what should I do in order to score 780? So a lot of it stems from people wanting to, mimic someone else's study plan, and our logic thinking, hey, if it works for them, it probably works for us. So that's most often than not true, although my story is probably a little different. As I said, I have been teaching classes since 2008, so I was already very familiar with the content and with the tests that the GMAT had, the kind of questions, because that's what I was helping other people navigate. So some of the 780 comes from an innate understanding of the test and being a GMAT tutor. So that's not a study plan that I can recommend for you. Can't say, become a GMAT tutor, that's the way to get a good score, right? But I will talk about some lessons that I think are universally applicable from my story. And one of the key things is kind of like know your weaknesses. For example, when I started, I did do a little bit of preparation when I did that, when I wrote my GMAT, but what I did was I asked myself, what do I not know? All these years I had been relying on my serial test taking and skills that I had learned starting from the very first time I wrote the CAT in 2003. But since then, even now, if you ask me questions on like inequalities, geometry, I'm always going to think, and I'm going to get palpitations before I can confidently answer. So there are weak areas in my learning, and realizing that these are my weak areas was kind of my first step, because I did want to have a good score, and therefore I needed to know. I can't just say I'm a verbal tutor, so if I have a good verbal score, that's enough, and just whatever happens to math happens, right? I had to realize, okay, quant is my weakness, number theory, number properties, inequalities, functions, and geometry were my weak areas. So I had to identify those chapters. And once you identify the chapters, then you need to first realize, okay, how big an important or how big a flaw is this in my preparation, and you need to work on it. So you can't afford to say, I don't have good reading skills, reading comprehension is my weakness, but that's 1/3 of your verbal section. So if you're not confident in reading comprehension, that's going to be a problem area. That's a huge gap to fill. But an obscure topic that may or may not be tested in the GMAT, if that's your weak area, you can give it a low priority. Given the timeline that you have, you can determine whether you will be able to work on it and do justice to it. The final thing that I want to say is, don't assume this is my weak area, I have some knowledge of it, so I'm going to kick off from there. It could be that that chapter or that topic is your weak area, because whatever knowledge you think you have is flawed to begin with. So as a first step, I would say start from the basics, relearn the chapter concepts, and make sure you understand the concepts, the approach, the strategy before you actually start practicing questions. I focused a lot of my preparation on my weak areas before I wrote my GMAT, and I got that 780. And I attended Bhaskar's classes. I re-attended all of those classes for the quant lessons that I had a problem with, and I did about 200 questions practice on just quant, just to brush up and get me to that Q50 that I ended up getting, right? So these, I think, are lessons that anybody can take from my GMAT preparation, and I hope that those help you. One last question I want to address before I look at the questions in the chat. I went to USC Marshall and I graduated from there. How did I decide to go to USC Marshall? Why did I choose that particular school? And how did I decide to apply there? And how can you choose your schools, right? One thing, starting point is your data, like the rankings that you have, the class profile, average GMAT scores, average salary for the profession and the industry that you want to end up working in. All of those, the raw data is your first step, right? But you don't end your decision process with the rankings and the data. That's the starting point for your research and your decision making. Should not be the final step. So you don't just say, right, these are the top 5 schools in the world, I'll only study from the best and I'm gonna go there. That's not how you make the decision, right? You also have to look at whether those top 5 schools will do justice for you, your background, your interests, and so on. I had a good expectation when I went into my MBA decision-making process that there was a reasonable probability that I was going to come back to Wizako and I want to come back to teaching, because I absolutely loved it. My decision to do an MBA was more motivated by the point I was in my personal life and where I was and wanting to change stuff around it, rather than where I was in my professional career, right? So which means my value is not from saying I have a 780, I'm only going to apply to Harvard and Stanford. That's not what I wanted. Given that I was coming back to Wizako, the scholarship factor was a huge thing. I chose 8 schools. I ended up getting 2 admissions with 100% tuition fee waiver, and that was an important decision making factor for me, because I needed to see what matters most to me. Right? I had to play the game. I had to say there are alternative career paths that I might choose, in which case these are the industries like education and social consulting are the industries that I'm going to be looking at as an alternative career path. For that, which schools work for me, and also balance it off with the possibility that I was going to come back to the old company that I was working in which case I wanted to make sure a significant portion of my education was paid for. I was not going to live in the US, was not going to draw that $150,000 salary, right? So balancing that by knowing what is important to you is an important decision-making factor. And you have to talk to people. That's such a crucial step in your B school decision-making process. Reach out to the admission directors, talk to the schools, network with peers, people who have gone through the program, people who understand what it is like in the MBA program of your choice, and who can then give you honest feedback on what works in the program and what does not work in the program. So my decision to go to Marshall was based on my conversations with 3 of my of the class of 2020 and the class of 2019 people that I had talked to, as well as my interactions with the admission directors. I was able to do a lot of research on the schools, and I was able to say, I love this school, this is where I want to be, this is where I'll get the maximum value for the kind of network, for the kind of peer group that I intend building over these 2 years. So it's not just based on somebody saying, this is a good school, just go there, right? In fact, I did not apply to Harvard and Stanford at all because of all the factors that I had going in my consideration. And a lot of people wonder, why do you have a 780 and you didn't apply to Harvard? I didn't need to. It was not where I was destined to be. It was not what matched my goals, right? So take that consideration. And as a good first step to research the schools and to network with the peers, what you can do is reach out to business schools in MBA fairs. MBA fairs, the MBA Tour is a fair that is organized by MBA.com, which is your official GMAT website. They also have the MBA Tour, which is organized a few times a year, where you get the opportunity to kind of go and talk to the business schools. So the next one is happening on February 16th. Wizako, me and Bhaskar will be there as well. We have exciting offers for those who come see us at the MBA Tour. That's a short URL for actually registering on MBA.com's website. It's a free registration. Howard University, UC Berkeley, Haas, ISB, SDA Bocconi, IE Spain, a lot of fantastic schools are going to be there. We also have a few videos coming out over the course of the next week on why going to these MBA fairs matters and how to prepare and how to make a good impression on the admission directors. So, the usual, right? Subscribe and all of that, so you keep track of the videos that come out and you better prepared for Feb 16, right? All right, that's my initial spiel, getting a couple of questions about me and my thought and your preparation and B-school selection process out of the way. I'm finally looking at the chat. Let's get cracking. Alright, so first glance I see a lot of questions about people's profiles, right? There are questions where people have specifically mentioned what GMAT score you have, how many years of experience you have, and so on and so forth. You have also talked about, you basically asked me for suggestions, right? Well, again, as I said, it has to be based on what works for you, right? Absolutely. Can you do an MBA after 8 years, 13 years of work experience? You can. Should you be looking at a 1-year program or should you be looking at a 2-year program? You can actually look at both. I had 10, 12 years of work experience when I went for my 2-year MBA program, and there were others in my class who also had similar work experience, right? So you can look at the value proposition offered by the schools, offered by the programs in terms of one key factor would be geographical location, actually. So look at the value proposition in terms of your ability to relocate to that region based on the 1-year program or the 2-year program, right? So for example, if you're looking at relocating into the US, that's a high probability. I'm an exception to the rule. I actually chose to come back to India after my graduation, right? 99% of students who go to get an US MBA do so because they want to relocate there. Same applies to an European MBA and so on. So factors to consider is what are the chances of getting a work visa after a 1-year program or a 2-year program. In some parts of the world, by getting a work visa is tougher. You may want to do a 2-year program simply because you might want to do that internship as a way to connect with prospective recruiters, as a way to impress prospective teams, so that they are able to take a decision and say, even if sponsorship is a bit of a problem, I love this guy, I love this person, I love what they're contributing and how efficient they are, and I want them on my team. So it gives you an opportunity to make that impression and allow companies to decide to recruit you despite any visa restrictions, and then fight on your behalf to get you that visa, right? So consider 2-year MBA and 1-year MBAs also based on not just your work experience, but also based on which part of the world you want to go to, and based on whether it allows you to stay in that part of the world. Language is another factor to consider if you're going to Europe, right? I'm also looking at the questions. Let's see. Can an average candidate get admits to business schools, like all the top ones, with a high GMAT score of 780? Okay. You don't need a 780 to get into any of these schools. And if you're getting a 780, you're not an average candidate, are you? Because that's in the top 1 percentile of people who are writing the GMAT, right? So but the decision making process is based on so many factors, and your GMAT is just one of them. It's not the only factor. If you're looking at the really top schools, and if you are an Indian male IT engineer, I would say you would need 730, 740 plus, simply because that's a large pool of candidates who are probably equally qualified that they are choosing from. But if you have significant work experience or significant achievements in that work experience, varied interests, other ways you can differentiate your profile, and if you have a 780, you're definitely not an average candidate, right? So if you have a really good score, 730 plus, you can get an admit into the top schools. We've had students who have done that, 740, 750, and you will have a fantastic scholarship at the top schools. So yeah, that's my answer for that. There's a question about how you can make your SC section better. You're struggling with hard OG questions, but on easy and medium questions, you're having a high accuracy. So that's a good thing. I would say analyze your performance a little more, right? Don't just say you are making mistakes in the easy questions or hard questions. There might be more to your patterns. For example, you might be making mistakes in SC because all your mistakes are modifier based and you don't understand how to approach modifier questions. So easy, hard, medium questions, it might be modifier questions where you're making the majority of your errors. So that's a concept error, which would mean you need to go back and revise learn your modifier chapter. You might be making a mistake because you are a slow reader and it takes you time to read and process each of the answer options, especially if they are long answer options with the whole sentence or a significant portion of the sentence underlined. In which case you might want to try something else, like simultaneously scanning across multiple answer options, improving the speed of reading. You might be making a mistake because you focus so much on the underlined part, you forget the rest of the sentence and the meaning that the sentence is trying to convey. In which case you have to tell yourself what's the meaning and not change focus and not lose focus. And once you identify something is the right answer, you have to kind of fit it into the original sentence and see whether it now makes sense. If it doesn't, then it's time for you to revisit your options, right? So just saying I have a high accuracy or a low accuracy in SC, CR, RC, quant, or in easy questions or high difficulty questions is not enough of an analysis. I would ask you to go deeper and analyze the why. Everybody makes mistakes for a handful of reasons. Like you might make 10 mistakes, but they're going to be for 3 reasons over and over again. So if you can identify your 3 reasons, which could be anything from conceptual understanding to silly mistakes, you would be able to say, okay, I keep making this mistake, so I'm not gonna do it anymore. I'm gonna consciously look out for that, right? So that is definitely one thing you can do, and that's what will be the right way for you to improve your SC. In a couple of weeks, we have a video coming out on how you can create an error log and track your errors and track your performance. So watch out for that. Hopefully that video will help you improve your SC accuracy as well. Okay. Harita, I think your question has been answered in the chat. But if you have further questions and you're not sure what's the correct course for you or how long you have to prepare or anything of that sort, you can also sign up for a strategy session with the team, and they would be able to give you more advice on kind of how to prepare, right? All right. Vikash, I'm looking at your 12th and 10th grades. Okay, first off, if you guys are looking at preparing, doing your MBA or 1-year executive MBA or MS outside of India, right? There are a lot of factors that matter, including your GMAT score, but maybe not so much your 10th and 12th grade scores. Indian schools tend to focus more on your academic history than schools outside India tend to do. So what you want to do is kind of get work on your story, right? If you want to do an executive MBA in operations, you can do it from the best school in the world, and you can do it from like a school ranked 30th or 40th, right? If you just want me to suggest schools, all I'm going to do is rattle out a bunch of names, right? But think about this way. If you have a school in mind, right, the first step that you can do is go check out the school's class profile. What is the average GMAT score that they take into consideration? What is the typical background of people who come do this program? For example, if you're looking at an executive MBA program, average work experience might be in the 7 to 8 years range. If you have 5 years of work experience, it means that you're on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to average work experience, which means the amount of achievements that you have to talk about, the promotions and career progress that you can show would also be significantly limited compared to other people who are applying for the program. So what does that mean? That means you need to balance it off with something else. You can still target that school. That can still be a fantastic school in the world to go for. You don't reject it and you don't say, I'm not good enough for the school. You are good enough for absolutely any school you set your mind to. But it means that if the average GMAT score is 680 for the program, you are looking at scoring more than that to kind of balance off other parts of your profile that need a boost. The schools are going to be taking into consideration the holistic picture, a lot of these factors. And schools love to mention this. You'll hear this term if you talk to our admission directors, that they're looking at the fit of the candidate. What do they mean when they say, well, they'll be looking at the fit of the candidate? They're not looking at putting you into a box and seeing if you fit there. They are looking to see whether your story and your goals and your dreams match what the school can supply. It might be a school that is extremely focused on collaboration and teamwork and don't want the people fighting with each other in a competitive nature within the class. If that's the case, then you need to, in your resume, in your application, show that you have that collaborative spirit, that you have been an effective team member, and that you can therefore work with teams once this program begins as well. So that's one way they measure fit. And if you show that, even if you have lower work experience, even if you have a lower GMAT score, they might love your application because they're going to be thinking, this is the kind of person we want. This person's goals, this person's aim in life aligns so well with what we offer. Right? So those are the kind, and obviously the more career-driven factors, like the kind of companies that come to recruit from that particular school, the kind of roles that their alumni are working in and they have placed students in, should also match what you state as your goals. So you cannot go to USA Marshall and in your application essays write that you want to work in the oil and gas industry. So oil and gas is probably not centered around LA. You might want to more focus on like the tech industry and the entertainment industry and so on, which is what Los Angeles thrives on, right? So rather than suggesting schools, what I want you to think about is, I am going to this school because it aligns with my goals, and how can I build my profile up so that I become a good enough candidate to get there. So think along those lines, right? Think about what can I do to make myself better, rather than this is what I'm going to be doing, which schools can I apply to. It should be the other way around, right? 17 years of experience for a 2-year MBA might be a little bit of a stretch. They might recommend a 1-year MBA program, Rajara. Usually, average work experience in a 2-year MBA program is around 6 years, 6.5 years. So they'll take anywhere from 2 to 13, 14 years. 17 years is a bit of a stretch, right? So I would probably recommend that you look at an executive MBA program. Age doesn't matter, honestly. It's more the years of experience and the career progression you can show. And it's also based on where you are already in your career versus where they will be able to place you on graduation. That's the reason they won't take people with a lot of work experience, right? Because you are probably going to be working in a role that is much better than what you will get when you graduate. So if at all you're going to be applying for a 2-year program with 17 years of experience, you need to have a super solid reason to show that you're not going to get that experience and you're not going to be better off just staying in your current job. So maybe like someone who's an army veteran who's changing jobs, irrespective of the number of years of work experience, such a person will not have corporate experience. So then they might be more willing to look at that person's candidature rather than looking at someone who's already in a good position in the corporate world. So it's not a blind no, but it's very hard to get into a 2-year program at 17 years. You can practice CAT questions as a preparation for the GMAT, especially for the quant section. CAT verbal is not too related to GMAT verbal, so I would probably not recommend doing that. But Abhijit, ask yourself if you have exhausted GMAT questions before you start kind of pushing the boundaries and practicing CAT questions, mainly because you want to practice in a format that is as close to what will be tested in the GMAT, right? If you're already planning to prepare for the CAT and you're writing the CAT as well, then it's a fantastic idea to balance the two tests. But if you're just preparing for the GMAT and you just want to challenge yourself and do CAT questions, some of the questions, the way they're tested in the CAT would be different from the way they're tested in the GMAT. So also ask yourself how relevant the questions are. Otherwise, yes, if you're writing the two tests, you can definitely draw a bridge between the two tests and prepare for the two simultaneously. Ranked between 20 and 40. Rahul, they're definitely worth it in terms of the ROI, salary and placements. 2 years is enough for these schools, but again, ask yourself, it's even more worth it if you get a scholarship to these schools, right? So if you can get a fantastic GMAT score and go into a 20 to 40 ranked school with like 50% tuition fee off, 70% off, 100% tuition fee off, then that's going to be amazing for your career prospects, right? Because that's what determines your return on investment. It's not just the average salary on graduation. So how much you're going to shell out for the education and for the program. So especially schools in the 20 to 30, there are really fantastic schools in that ranking. So yes, definitely look at them, right? In fact, a lot of people, when they're applying for the schools, they choose 1 to 2 schools in like the 1 to 10 range that are like the dream schools, and then the 11 to 20 range that are more like the target schools, and then the 20 to 35 range as kind of like the safe schools, right? So if you're very particular about getting into the MBA program in a particular year, that's a good strategy to adopt. Kind of spread your schools across the range, and then you will be able to take a call, balance it off. I have a 70% tuition fee waiver or 100% tuition fee waiver at the school that's ranked 32nd. That offers everything that I want to have, but then I have this better ranked school that's offering me a 40% tuition fee waiver. So then you try to balance the two off, then you do your ROI calculations and see which one will give you a better value for your money, right? You can do that. It is, Christian, verbal solutions or on the cards. We will have some practice tests and practice questions, solutions posted in the next couple of weeks. OG verbal solutions would probably be more down the line. So you're adding more Wizako content to Wizako's portal before we work on OG verbal solutions. Ipshita, as for scholarships, that's a very good question. You don't have, the first thing is for most scholarships, you don't have to apply for the scholarship, right? It is part of your regular MBA application process itself. You don't even have to fill in an extra form in order to be eligible for the scholarship. So you have, schools start off the admission process with a certain pot of money, right? And what they do is, they offer the scholarships to students that they really want as part of their program. And they use the scholarship as kind of like an incentive to attract you to choose that program, right? So there will be obviously more scholarships available if you apply early in the process in round 1, as we call it, simply because 100% of the pot is still available. So at the end of round 1, some of the students would have been made admission offers, would have been made scholarship offers. Some of them would have taken it up, some of them might not have taken it up because of the balance and the ROI calculation that I was just talking about. You get scholarship from 2 schools, now you're like, which one is going to give me better value? So you might reject one school's admission, take the other, right? So the money goes back into the pot because you have not taken up the scholarship offer. So now when they start off round 2, they're starting off the pot with like 60%, 70% of the money. So they have more scholarships to offer, but obviously their freedom in offering scholarships has come down a little because they no longer have access to 100% of the pot, which is why we recommend that if you're really keen on getting scholarships, apply as early as you can. If you apply in round 1, you will have greater chances of getting scholarship. A second factor to consider is there are going to be lots of Indians who are applying. That's a given, right? In round 1, they've already recruited a few people who have very similar profiles to what you have, and you're applying in round 2. Now both their admission and scholarship decision is going to be based on one more factor, and that is that they're looking for a diverse pool of candidates to join their MBA program, but they already have people like you. So how many more people like you can they afford to take, right? Without compromising on their targeted goal of diversity, right? So these are factors to consider. Definitely start preparing now. You are in time if you're working on your GMAT right now to apply in round 1. Round 1 would mean if you want to start your MBA in 2023, that's fall of the next year. Then applications will open in June, July of 2022. That's 1 year in advance. And round 1 deadlines will be October of 2022. So that's your target. By then you should have your GMAT, you should have your application essays and all of that in place. Okay? The other thing I want to talk about the scholarship, Ipshita, is there are some schools where you will have scholarships exclusively for women candidates. There would be scholarships exclusively for people from certain underrepresented minorities or people who are applying for the MBA program with a certain goal in mind. Maybe they want to work in the public government and public space, or they want to do some sort of social work after social entrepreneurship, right? After their graduation. In which case, those kind of exclusive scholarships might require an additional application form, but if they do, they will let you know, and you will submit it as part of your normal application itself. You will just have to write like an extra essay or something like that, right? Most schools do not require you to write anything extra for a scholarship. Most women's scholarship don't require it either. Something called the Forte Foundation, the 3% Club, which are organizations that are working to promote more women board members in leading corporations. If they need to have more board members who are women, they need to have more women working in organizations in leadership roles, which means they need more women in MBA programs. So they give money to the schools and the schools give it out as scholarship. I am, for example, a Forte Fellow, which means my scholarship from USC Marshall came from the Forte Foundation, which promotes women in business. I am doing a video on that too. It should come out in the next couple of weeks. Check that out for more details. Okay. Canada is a great place to do your business, to do your MBA. That's my opinion on that, actually. Canada is a good place. Look at the top 10 schools in Canada. If you are looking at living in Canada long term, especially if that's your goal, Canada is a fantastic place to do your MBA, simply because of the ease in the immigration process and all of that. I am not sure of the average score needed for John Molson School of Business. I think the best place would be to check the class profile. I don't remember these numbers off the top of my head, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that. Second MBA and third MBA. Well, third MBA is more like an ouch, right? Don't do that. Second MBA is acceptable. USA Marshall was my second MBA. I already did an MBA in India. But obviously, if you can get a good school in your first MBA and that's all that you're doing, that would be fantastic. Because this is MBA that you do is for your lifetime. You're gonna have it on your resume and you're gonna show everybody this is the alma mater you belong to, right? And you wanna have that pride, you wanna have that network, that peer group that's going to help you throughout the career. So just focus on doing a good MBA the first time around. That's definitely going to help. A lot of people in India do a second MBA for the global transition, right? You might have done an MBA, recruited and worked for a company that's based out of India. Now you've progressed in your career and you've reached a stage in life where you don't have anywhere up to go left as long as you're in India. So I want to relocate to a different location just to kind of expand on your opportunities, right? So that's one reason people do a second MBA. Another reason is if you have some sort of a gap, something, maybe you took a break to work in a startup or to work in your own company and then didn't work out, and now you're trying to get back into the corporate world. That's going to be difficult because a lot of companies might say, oh, you have a gap of 2 years, we don't really want to consider you and take you in. So a good way to kind of bridge that gap is to take another 2 years or take another year, do a second MBA, and then use the network that you build as part of your MBA program to get that job, to get that career that you're looking at. If you are doing a second MBA and you already have an MBA, there are some schools that will not accept candidates who are doing a second MBA. So just watch out for that. There are some schools, off the top of my head, Duke doesn't accept people who are doing a second MBA. UC Berkeley Haas does not accept people who are doing a second MBA because of the school policy. Like they cannot award someone a degree equivalent to what they have already gained. So if you have an MBA, you cannot go and get another MBA from these schools because of the school policy. So just be careful about that and watch out for that. If you have a PGDM, you might still be able to get an MBA from these schools because that's a postgraduate diploma, it's not a master's degree. So it might not be considered a duplicate degree. So check with the admission directors of the schools if you are looking at a second MBA. Singapore and UK are definitely good destinations, Kuldeep. It would be pragmatic if that's where you want to end up living, right? If your decision is geography is what you're basing your decision on, then ask yourself, is that where you want to be long term, right? So if you want to relocate to those countries, then it's a good decision. Singapore relocation might be easier than relocation to the UK, so check into all of that. NTU is a good school for you to consider if you're looking at Singapore. Shashank, you have a 760, which is a good school, which is a good GMAT score. You have 2 years of work experience. You are already in a leadership role. Whatever you have given out there as your profile sounds good to me, right? So by 2023, I'm assuming you will have another year of experience, and whatever you've shared as your experience till date. If that's the case, there are a lot of factors that are working in your favor. You have leadership role, you have a good GMAT score, you have a slightly different profile in the sense that you're working in a different industry and a different role from the more common profile of an IT engineer. Those factors work in your advantage, so now it's going to depend on your ability to capitalize on the advantage. Make sure your story is coherent and you're able to tell a legitimate story as to what your long-term goals are and how your 2 years in the tech space is going to help you with your long-term goal. Make sure that you are highlighting the skills that you have gained that are transferable to whatever other industry you want to work in after graduation, and make sure you choose schools that value that tech experience. If you want to talk to one of our strategists on framing your essays and stuff, then you can definitely reach out to us. My admin does help you with the process, but I would say 2023 is a good year. You're in a good place to target the schools. If you have a family business, the one thing that about being in a family business is your ability to tell that story. There are people out there who have a gap in their experience, and to kind of hide the gap, they'll say, oh, I was working in my father's company, but they won't have actually worked, so they won't have, if asked about their work experience, they won't be able to tell that story. But if you have legitimate work experience, as long as you're able to convey that story, you're perfectly fine, right? You can apply to both schools in India and outside. Explain why you're taking a break and how the MBA is going to either help you go back to your family business, or how and why you're shifting to a regular corporate career from working with your family, right? So as long as your story makes logical sense, you are perfectly fine. Okay, so some questions are kind of repeating. I don't want to repeat myself and say the same thing. Keep saying research is cool that you're applying to over and over again. But research is cool that you're applying to, and take your decision based on that. Again, if you missed it out in the first part of our discussion, there is an MBA Tour, MBA Fair happening on the 16th of February. The MBA Tour is an MBA Fair that is organized by MBA.com, which is the official website for GMAT. They are the ones who are conducting the GMAT. Fantastic schools are participating in the MBA Fair. So you have Harvard University, you have Berkeley, Haas, you have SDA Bocconi, you have ISB, IE Spain, Asian School of Business. There are lots of, about 30 universities, really good ones that you may have heard of, really good ones that you may not have heard of, that are participating. It's a 4-hour event in the evening on Feb 16th, so open up your calendars and make sure you participate. It's a good way for you to go talk to the admission directors of the schools, ask them questions, and get to know the program better. And then you can take all of these decisions yourself. If I have X years of work experience, if I have an X GMAT score, which of these schools are a better fit for me, given the return on investment that I want to have. Of course, there are good questions and bad questions to ask the admission directors. So we're going to help you with that process. One, we're going to be there in person, me and Bhaskar. So if you want to drop in and chat with us, you can do that. We have offers in place, whether you are in the application stage or in the GMAT stage on our product. So come see us for all of that. Second, we're going to be releasing a bunch of videos over the next couple of weeks before Feb 16 to help you with the preparation process, so that when you do go talk to the admission directors, you are making a positive impact. You don't have to be applying this year, even if you're applying next year. These are good people to network with, right? And most schools will give you application fee waivers and so on. It costs about $150 to $250 somewhere in that range to apply to each and every business school. And if you can get an application fee waiver, that's money saved that you can probably use towards applying to some other school, right? So definitely talk to the schools, definitely interact with them and research a lot of the schools, right? I don't know if you should practice 5,000 questions, honestly, because it's more about the quality of your preparation rather than the quantity. But if that's what you think you need to do in order to have the confidence, then do that. Maybe take a check after the 2000th question, take a mock or a diagnostic to see how you are doing, rather than just continuing to practice so that you can better plan your practice sessions, right? Your 7th, 8th, 10th grades absolutely do not matter, so don't worry about that. CFA qualification is good. Alright. I'm going to take one last question, and then we'll wrap up the session with that. Okay. If someone takes up a job and does good at his or her job and works for a couple of years, will it be considered a substitute if he/she has a skeleton in his or her cupboard? Okay, first off, don't ask that question to an admission director. Don't go to them and tell them you have a skeleton in your cupboard. They will think you have murdered someone, right? That's a too strong a term to use to refer to a gap year. If you see, here's the thing. The psychology of people who are living in other countries is different from the psychology of Indians, right? In a lot of countries, having a gap year or two is even considered the norm, right? You finish college and then you say, I don't want to work, I want to travel to Europe and go on a backpacking trip, and then you just pack your bags and you leave. And you come back and you say, oh, I had this experience, and no one bothers that you have a gap year, right? Or you say, I wanted to try my own business and it failed miserably, and then I came back and worked in a corporate. That's fine, because that shows that you're a risk taker, you're willing to try something new, you're willing to experiment with stuff. So first off, stop thinking of your gap years or any gap or any bad 6th standard ACATs as skeletons in your closet. Don't go and scare the admission directors. They are going to, trust me, think that you went ahead and murdered someone. Alright, so don't do that. Second, yes, if you like the examples that I gave you, if you have a justification for your gap years, then you can explain why exactly you ended up with a gap year, rather than saying, oh, I didn't get a job. Don't do that, right? Make it sound like you were trying out something and that didn't work out, and so you're back, or you had a child, you took a pregnancy break, and then you're back, whatever, right? That's all fine. As long as you have a valid explanation for it, they're not going to worry too much about it. And as long as you can show career progress in the years that you have worked, and your long-term goals tie into whatever work you're doing now, and of course you have a good GMAT score. That's the basis, right? All of my point starts with if you have a good GMAT score, right? And then we'll take it from there. Yeah, so, right, well, yes, a change is acceptable. Don't worry about it. You can justify it. You can say that you worked as an engineer and then you were interacting with business analysts as part of your job. You found that you had the skills for it, you were interested in it, and so you decided to make it. Yes, just don't make it sound scary, right? Make it sound like, yeah, that's a well thought out decision that you took, and you can justify absolutely anything, right? Alright, I'm going to stop here for today's session. I'm glad that we had the session. I'm glad you kept the questions coming. But yeah, I will see you around. We'll have another session soon, and I'll see you at the MBA Tour on February 16th. Yeah? Alright, thank you guys. Have a good night. This was a fantastic session. Keep the questions coming.